Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast, where it's all about helping a million of us decide to go, like, you know what? If we don't like the system, we're going to change it. And I have a pioneer. I have Dr. Michelle Miley Rudge with us today. And okay, we're starting over. So, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast. I have the amazing Dr. Michelle Mudge-Riley here. And she is a pioneer in this field because she transitioned to a non-clinical career in 2004. I want you to think about that for a minute, right? That's almost 17 years ago. And I cannot even begin to imagine what it was like then, but she's going to take us through all of that. She is an amazing speaker, and she is the founder of Physicians Helping Physicians. She helps physicians transition to non clinical careers. So get ready to be blown away. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Michelle.
Thank you so much. Always happy to be here with you.
Yeah, this is going to be so exciting. So, we're going to start off, we're going to go all in because I have a lot of questions for you. Um, so, take us back to 2004. And you're making that transition. So you spent all these years, you become a physician, and for most of us, what we know is the clinical side. And then you decided to make the transition to a non clinical career. What did that feel like for you?
Yeah, so thanks for setting the stage. So back in 2004, it was very difficult. So, number one, all the resources that exist today didn't exist back then. And the world was almost more closed in a way because we couldn't meet each other on social media. And, for all the negatives of social media, one of the big positives is you get to meet people you might not have ever met otherwise. And hear stories that you might not have heard unless they were on the news or some TV show. So back in 2004, I was in the middle of my pathology residency. And I'd always wanted to be a doctor, like most of us, right? So I went straight through. I was lucky enough to get into med school my first try, even though I was just really an average student. It all just really worked out. Was so happy. It was the best day of my life when I got into med school. And actually, I really enjoyed the first few years. When I got to my third and fourth year, I started to struggle because it was confusing for me in that I didn't think that I wanted to do actual clinical medicine. And what did that mean? And I didn't even understand it myself, but patient care wasn't jiving for me. I couldn't find any rotation that I was really excited about. They were all okay, but I couldn't see myself doing them for the next 40 years. So I had to do some quick reprioritization because, first of all, I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And through all this, I realized, well, maybe an ER physician, EM, emergency medicine, is best for me because I think quickly. I like to move between things. I have a little bit of ADHD. I like to multitask, and shift work seemed to be maybe a good thing for me. But then, the patient care aspect is still there. So what do? Radiology wasn't jiving for me. So I ended up going into pathology, which originally I thought, gosh, all the crazy doctors are pathologists. They're very much introverted. They work in the basement, all this. And here I am going into pathology residency. Well, I get there, it ends up being slightly malignant, but I was also in a position in my life where I was very confused and lost. And at the time I didn't know, but now looking back, I can say the business aspect of medicine was always the thing that was very interesting to me. Still is, in fact. So what did that mean? And how would I then create a career for myself? And no one could tell me. And everyone looked at me like I was very strange. And that wasn't fun for me. I'm somewhat of a people pleaser. And so it was kind of like I felt like this giant failure. I mean, really, it was a tough time for me, because of all of these feelings, plus the fact that I need a job and what am I going to do? So I ended up just talking to as many people as I could and figuring out that I could get into a job at a medical device company. So I'll pause there, before I keep going, because I could go off way down so many different rabbit holes, but I want to make sure that we keep this on track for what you want to talk about.
No, this is perfect because, I think when it comes to our world as physicians, there is this thought process that there is one path for everybody. And there really isn't, right? So, even as somebody who helps physicians embrace entrepreneurship, I don't even say everybody should start a private practice or everybody should leave clinical medicine or people shouldn't be in employed positions. Like, I show them how to build businesses even as employed physicians because we're wired to do different things. So my dad he's 84 at the time of this recording, and he was one of the first people to do an emergency medicine type residency, I think, and he had done surgery first. So emergency medicine was, so he did two residencies until today. He's like, "Oh, I read this anatomy book. Did you know?" I'm like, "I don't want to hear about anatomy." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm the complete opposite because I was like, I can give this a decade, but there's so many things that I want to do. And he's okay, and I'm okay, and you're okay. Do you see what I mean? We're just different. So I like that you brought all of that out because there's somebody who's going to be like, my career doesn't look like somebody else's, so something must be wrong with the way I feel.
Yeah.
But there is nothing wrong with the way you feel. So this is amazing. So yeah, so take us on.
Yeah, so that's exactly how I felt, that something was wrong with just the way I was seeing things. And so as I continued to navigate my way, and it was very messy, I'll tell you. And I think it may be for any physician who's really looking at something other than a traditional clinical practice, because it isn't something that gets talked about in medical school or residency. And it's actually even taboo to talk about it in some circles with sometimes older physicians or physicians with a certain perspective. And so that is, all of these layers together. I just knew that I couldn't spend the rest of my life unhappy. And I saw so many other doctors unhappy as well. And this was 20 years ago. So I would recommend, if you are someone who's thinking, I want to go this non traditional route, that's okay, first of all. And it's okay to be looking at a lot of different things and not settling on one thing quite yet, because you still have this growth process to go through that a lot of us miss as we're going through school and residency because we don't have to go through it. So everyone else is figuring out who they are and how to have their careers and what they want to do and what their personal development plans are, their goals, objectives. We often don't even get talked about what our goals and objectives are. And that's a really
Wow.
important thing to think about. Where do you
Yeah.
want to be in 5 years? And what do you want to be doing? And how do you want to be living? All of these things. So it's okay to be looking at lots of things and feeling a little bit frazzled right now. The one thing that you can do that will not only make you feel less alone, but also help guide you is to talk to as many people as possible. And I tell this to physicians all the time. And sometimes I get really frightened stares or just kind of like, really? Because we don't, again, get this advice and it feels like, okay, I'll talk to 2 or 3 people. No,
Not gonna
50.
cut it.
Yeah, you got to talk to 100. I mean, I promise you, doing that, it's free, first of all. It is work for sure. And it's scary. It's taking you possibly out of your comfort zone, especially if you're an introvert. We're both introverts. And
Yep.
so I tell you, if we can do it, you can do it. So,
And I love that you say that because that is one of the primary reasons why this podcast exists.
mm,
Because I always would research like physician entrepreneurs because I want to see what other doctors who are in business are doing. And there's no place to find them, right? So there are pockets of things here and there, but there's no one stop shop where you're like, okay, let me just go here and go see what doctors are doing that is not just exactly what is in the box. Like that's not the prescription. And I was like, well, we can bring them all in one spot and we can all talk about it. And you can have residents, you can have new attendings, you can have people who are ready to scale, shift, all that stuff come to one place and meet everybody. So that's a strategy. I love it. That's amazing. Now you alluded to growth, right? That you still have this growth that you have to go through. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, sure. So, this personal growth that we all need to kind of go through is, I think, related to all of our individual career journeys. And everyone goes through this, whether they realize it or not. And some people are more aware of it. If you're not aware of it, doesn't mean you're not going through it. But it's a process of figuring out what's right for you now, but also looking ahead as much as possible and being able to define what might be right for you 5, 10 years from now. You're never going to get it perfect because it's just impossible. We don't have that crystal ball. We can't predict. COVID taught us that, if nothing else. But you do have to be thinking about it, because if you don't think about where you want to be, how are you going to get there? So I see people who, and I talk to them, and 2 years or 3 years later, I'll talk to them again, and nothing has changed, even though they're terribly unhappy. They hate what they're doing, they hate their life situation and circumstances, but yet nothing has changed and they're not sure what to do. So, again, another simple, free thing that you can do is to sit down with yourself and, in a calm place, in a calm demeanor, just when you're not stressed about something. Maybe you have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, whatever it is that kind of helps you to get into that zone of feeling and figuring things out and deep reflection. And kind of think about, so what do you want your life to be like 5 years from now? Are you living internationally and you don't want to be, or vice versa? Are you, even personally, are you married and don't want to be, or vice versa? Do you want kids, or do you want your kids to be in a certain place? And how much money do you want to make? How much free time do you want? All with, first of all, just kind of a brainstorming attitude. So don't limit yourself at first. Now, we all know we can't all just sit on the beach and drink margaritas all the time and make $500,000 a year. I mean, maybe there's something you can do during that, but that's probably a separate podcast. But so put on that lens of brainstorming first, and then start to refine as you can. This is an exercise that will take you time. It is not something you can sit down and figure out in 30 minutes. You're going to have to reflect, continuously evolve, and that's okay, because that's part of this growth process. And if you're doing that, you are doing that growth process.
I love it. And, for the person who's like, okay, there is so much power in just sitting and defining where you want to go. Think about how amazing it is that you're a physician. That's how you got there.
That's
Right? You
right.
decided, this is what I'm going to do. This is what it's going to cost. I've decided I'm going to do it. And you go do it. And imagine doing that in every aspect of your life. That is just mind blowing. And I'll tell you two quick things that happened. One is in the Entrepreneur Business School, I had asked a question: what are you going to accomplish this week? It's a blank slate. You can write whatever you want on it. And then one of the students was like, you know what? I started doing this and it's like magic. Like, I write the things and they happen, right? So that's one. Two is that we are hosting for the Entrepreneur Business School, we are hosting our first in-person vision retreat. But we did one, last year. It was virtual. And a doc was like, it is like magic. Same word, right? Like, I wrote all these things. I decided, okay, this is how I'm going to get there. These are the things I need to put in place. These are the new habits I need to acquire and all that. And I came back and I'm checking things off is the weirdest thing. So I'm saying that to say what Dr. Riley is talking about is so simple, and that's the problem with simple things, right? Or easy things. It's easy to do, easy not to do. It's so easy that you can just miss it, but do it. So number one, talk to people. Number two, go set that intention. Beautiful. So now a physician is going like, okay, so traditional, non-clinical, what are the kind of options that are out there for a non-clinical career? Maybe start with some of the things you've done, some of the things the doctors you've worked with have done, and then other options.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. It is hard to find a place where all of the options are listed. And even if you can find a place like that, it's also not as comprehensive or magical, to use your word, as you would think, because even just seeing a list of things raises a whole nother set of questions, which are, what does that mean? How do I do that? How much money do I make? What's the career path? All of that. But let me take a step back. So when I was looking at, okay, what are my options? I knew I could work for an insurance company or a pharmaceutical or device company. And I think a lot of people feel that way at first because that's all we know about as physicians. That's what we see as other things that exist in outside of our world in practice. So I knew about those two things, and those were the things that I pursued initially. And I did end up going back to business school. It is not a requirement, and you don't have to do that in order to have a successful non-clinical career. But remember, the time and the place before social media, it was very hard to find information and to build skill sets. And so that for me felt like, okay, this is a way for me to do this. And I will say I don't regret any of that. So from that, I didn't learn about the other options in business school. What business school did was show me how to look at things in a new way. And I believe that podcasts like this will teach you those things. Even the Entre MD Business School will teach you how to look at things in a new way. And that's really what you need. You need to be able to see things that are there that you couldn't see before. So when I was doing that, I started to see all of these different things. So medical writing is one area that any physician can do, any specialty, any age, at any point in your career, and it can be multifaceted. So there are lots of different ways you can do medical writing. It can be through a PR firm, medical communications firm. It can, of course, be fiction writing, or it can be technical writing. So that's a huge, broad topic that I've talked about at my conference and in my podcast, and I won't go into detail here. I work for a pharmaceutical company right now. Initially, that was my first non-clinical job. I hated it the first time I did it. I love it now. So again, that's another example of how some things are right for you at certain points in your life. And if it's not right for you now, doesn't mean it won't be right for you later. So just remember that and keep remembering that your career will continue to evolve. In a pharmaceutical or biotech or device company, there are a lot of different options, again, beyond the scope of this podcast, but I will just mention that medical affairs exists, sales exists, clinical development and research exists, drug safety and pharmacovigilance. All of those exist within industry, I guess, is one other way of talking about it. There's leadership. So a lot of physicians feel like they want to change things, which I love. And how else are we going to change things if we're not sitting at the table? So leadership and administration, even though you may be going, oh, no way, that's why I hate what I'm doing right now. Again, for some people, it is the right thing. So there's lots of different paths within that. Entrepreneurship, again, something anyone can do at any point. Certain personalities are more attracted to it than others. And it can mean anything from building a practice to something completely non-medical. There are physicians who go open beds and breakfasts, who create products and services, all kinds of different businesses. So you can do that on the side or your full-time thing. It's really up to you. I'm just going to kind of name off some other things just so that people can understand just how vast this world is. So you have information technology. That's another huge, huge area. You have wound care, which is a bit more of the clinical side, but still non-traditional. You have utilization management and review, and there are lots of jobs within that area as well. It's not just simple peer review. There's lots of different levels, different aspects to it, different companies you can work for. So remember that. There's advisors and consultants, another very, very broad area that you can do part-time, full-time, piecemeal. A lot of people build what's called a portfolio career where they do lots of different types of things. So remember that too, another just important thing. Teaching, another huge universe where you can teach part-time, full-time. For university, you can be a dean, you can be a leader there, you can just teach one class. So let me pause there for a minute. Is there anything that you've heard of that you think we should elaborate on here that's non-clinical, or maybe something that you feel like isn't talked about enough in the area of non-clinical jobs?
Well, I think you gave a really broad, which is making me go like, oh, you have to tell us about your podcast, your conference, all of that, because clearly we can't unpack all of that. But
Yeah.
just to see that you gave so many options and yet you were like, okay, we might run out of time, so let me just stop here. That's how many options there are. I've looked at it. I didn't even realize there are that many. I think one of the questions that, doctors have is, well, if I go this route, am I able to replace my revenue from my clinical job with something like this? Or do I have to take a big pay cut and all those kind of things? So you've been in this space for a long time. What are your thoughts about that?
I love that question. It is a fear and it's a myth. So you
I
can
love
make
that. Let me just say it after you said it. It is a myth, people. It's a myth. Okay. I'm
you
sorry.
can you can make more money doing something non-clinical than in the clinical world. A bit sad in some cases because it just is sad that we don't get paid enough as physicians. But it is true that you can make more. And some specialties, they are definitely not taking a pay cut. So family medicine and pediatricians that I work with all the time, they're always making more money in a non-clinical career. Again, very sad because we need those specialties. The more highly specialized areas, so ortho, spine surgery, neurosurgery, at first, you may not be making as much as you're making clinically, but you can get there. So remember that too. A lot of times you might have to take a slight pay cut to then go higher than where you are now and where you might ever be in clinical medicine. Many physicians who have transitioned, who speak at the conference, talk about taking that initial pay cut so that then they could make more and have the life that they were looking for, the work that they love. So let me just say this too. I used to think I was lazy and I hated work. And when I got into a non-clinical career, I realized I don't hate work. I work too much actually. So if you're feeling like you might be that way, because a lot of people tell me this too, it may just be the work that you're doing. It isn't speaking to you. It isn't working for you, but there can be work that does work for you. So don't stop looking.
Oh my goodness. All right, so two things here. These are so many bombs. Like you have to go back and listen to this again. The first thing is that it's a myth, right? Now you may take that initial pay cut, but it's a pay cut to rise and to give you the quality of life and all that stuff that you want in a career that you love. But the second thing, which is so powerful, I hope you didn't miss it, is find what you love. You know what I mean? Like I think as physicians, we worked too hard, right? We worked really hard in high school because our agenda was to get into a good pre-med program. And then worked really hard there to get into a great med school. Then we worked really hard there to get into a great residency and all that stuff. To end up then doing something you don't love after sacrificing over a decade of your life makes zero sense. Right? Now, you may have to do that in the beginning, but if you're doing that in the beginning, it's to get to where you want to go to. I think we're all wired to do different things. And if we find the thing, we can work hard, but we're never working because we enjoy what we do. So that's such a powerful point that you made. Like if you're doing this thing, maybe it's not speaking to you. Maybe you should find your thing. This is so good. All right. So somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to go, Google up some stuff. They're going to ask questions. They're going to do all this. Then they're going to start looking at job openings. And then this imposter syndrome is going to kick in. Like, who in the world do you think you are? You're just a clinician. You're not an MBA. You're not a suit. You don't belong in that world. What will you tell that doctor?
Well, so we all belong wherever you want to go, really. And I can understand imposter syndrome. I have it. I think we all have it. We are ambitious personalities who strive to do the best work that we can, type A in most cases. And so you're not alone there. You've just got to push through it because a lot of people have imposter syndrome. And part of what got you to where you are now is what's going to get you to where you want to be. And all of these translatable skills, which again, you may feel like you don't have any of the skills that the job description talks about. But remember, all of the things that you're doing take a certain skill set, determination, persistence, all these things that then can be translated to what you really want to do in this new job. And you can also do it in a tangible way, a results oriented way, which again is beyond the scope of this podcast. But that is the trick to convincing a hiring manager, a recruiter, or someone that you can do something that you've probably never done. And the other reality is don't get worried about it because you'll get training on the job. It's amazing. I mean, you get into something and they're going to teach you what to do, what to say, how to do it, as in all of these non-clinical jobs. So it's a secret that I don't think is talked about often enough and something people fear.
Love it. All right. So people are like, enough, both of you. Where can we find Dr. Michelle Mudge-Riley? So tell us where we can find you, and especially the conference and your podcast.
I would say you've got to come to the conference. If you are considering a non-clinical career, come to be surrounded by a supportive community, a non-judgmental community where you can talk about the things that you've been wanting to talk about, get your questions answered. No question is a bad question in the environment that the conference creates. And you'll get to meet a lot of other doctors who have successfully transitioned to a non-clinical career. You'll get to hear their stories, the pros, the cons, some resources on how to do it. And we talk about the specific different areas. So every conference is different. We have different speakers at every conference. I try to run them twice a year, in the beginning of the year and the end. And then there'll be workshops throughout the year as well. So if you need a resume, if you need to figure out your elevator pitch, practice your interviewing, we have all the resources for you and ways to do that. So check out the website. It's phphysicians.com, or you can just Google Physicians Helping Physicians, and you will find the website. I'm on all the social media. You can find me. My name is a funny last name because it's hyphenated. So just put it in there. You'll find me, connect with me. And I'd love to talk with you and kind of point you in the right direction if possible.
Love it. Okay. Now, I always end every episode with this question. So I ask every doctor to share the episode. And the reason for that is I'm like, there are a million of us. Okay. We've complained about the system. We don't like the system. We don't like the way we're being treated in medicine, all that stuff. If we don't like it, we can change it, right? There's strength in numbers. So what would you say is the reason why a doctor listening right now needs to hit the share button and share this episode of the podcast?
I love that. I love that because there's strength in numbers. And if you are feeling any of this, there's a strong likelihood that possibly hundreds of other people are feeling the same things and resonating with the same things that you do. And if not, they're resonating with different things. And so it's really important to get the word out because we're physicians. We want to help each other. I always tell doctors, just find another doctor because they remember they're going to be more willing to help you. You may feel like that sounds foreign because a lot of times in clinical medicine, we're pretty mean to each other. But in the non-clinical world, that is not true. We are supportive and helpful. And so please, yes, share this with others who may be hurting. There's way too much depression and suicide and burnout out there. We need to help each other, support each other. I love that. You get me so excited when I start talking about this. So thank you for asking me to speak on it.
Yay. Thank you. Well, you guys heard her. Share the episode. Share it. Thank you so much for coming on. This is so valuable. And people, you have to check out her podcast. It's the same name, right?
It
Physicians
is.
Helping Physicians.
It
So
is.
same platform you're on. Go check out her podcast where you can go in deeper depth in all these things, because you don't, if your thing has always been to do that, to go into industry, to be a medical writer, any of those things, it's a possibility, and it's not something that is rare. Like, there are many doctors doing it, and you can too. So thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, people, I will see you on the next episode of the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast.